And we're live. Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Authors Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. My name is Kimberly Hensle Lowrance, and I host and produce this show in partnership with fellow writer Joe Moldover. Here in Authors Bookstores, we bring to you a conversation between an author and his or her or their favorite bookstore, the favorite independent bookstore, to shine a light on storytelling, creativity, and the small businesses that enrich our communities. We talk books, book selling, writing, and we are so glad that you are here. Today, I am so pleased to welcome author Kate McIntyre and bookseller Nicole DiCello to the show. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm very happy you're here. So before we jump into questions, let me just tell our audience a little bit about both of you. So Kate McIntyre is an assistant professor of creative writing at WPI, which stands for Worcester Polytechnic Institute, which is based in Worcester, Massachusetts. So for our non-New England folks, that's about an hour and 15 minutes west of Boston, one of the largest, I guess it's the largest city in central Mass, isn't it?
In New England, I believe, the second.
Yeah, the second really? Largest. Yep, in New England.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I'm learning. I didn't know. I've lived in Massachusetts for a long time. I should know that. So that's that's good to know. Kate's story collection, MAD PRAIRIE, is the winner of the Flannery O'Connor Award for Short Fiction, which was selected by Roxane Gay. And this book came out from the University of Georgia Press in September. Kate's fiction and essays have appeared in a number of journals, including Denver Quarterly, the Cincinnati Review, Copper Nickel, and so many others. And she is a recipient of a number of residencies as well. She has a notable essay in Best American Essays 2014 and a special mention in the 2016 Pushcart Prize anthology. Previously, the managing editor of the Missouri Review, Kate is now the managing editor of the Worcester Review, a publication of the Worcester County Poetry Association. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
Okay, Nicole. Nicole is the owner of Bedlam Book Cafe in Worcester, Massachusetts. Bedlam Book Cafe, which opened in 2018, sells a curated collection of fine used books, as well as a selection of new books, focusing on academic presses, literature, arts and humanities, and the sciences. The store aims to be a vibrant intellectual, cultural, and community hub, encouraging diversity and access to information. Nicole earned her MFA in poetry from Emerson College in Boston and spent 20 years in the corporate world before opening Bedlam. We have to hear about that. Nicole currently serves on two boards, the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee for the City of Worcester and the Worcester County Poetry Association. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. To our audience, if you're watching live with us on Facebook, we're doing a giveaway of MAD PRAIRIE. You may wonder why I have two copies. One of them is for you. Thank you to the University of Georgia Press for donating a copy to give away today. To be eligible to win a copy of this book that you absolutely want to read, please post a question via a comment below the broadcast, and we will announce a winner before the end of the show. You do need to have a U.S. mailing address. That's the one ticker. Okay, great. Logistics are over. Now on to questions. So let's talk about Bedlam Book Cafe, because that is one of the connections that we have today. Kate, tell us about your relationship to the store, why you wanted to talk to Bedlam and Nicole today. What makes the store so special? What do you admire about what Nicole's doing?
Yeah. So I arrived here in Worcester in 2018, and one of the first things I do when I arrive in a new place is check out the bookstore scene. And I was so disappointed because we didn't have a really wonderful independent bookstore. However, then I joined the board of the Worcester County Poetry Association, which is where I met Nicole, and I heard that she would soon be opening one. She did, and it is an absolutely fabulous space. It's located in this, I don't know what the building used to be. I'm sure you do, but it's enormous. And there's Bedlam. There's a fancy plant store. There is a consignment and antique store downstairs. There's a cafe where you can get lunch across the way. I believe there's a barber shop. Are they still there?
Yeah,
it's a really vibrant area of town. And then, right in the center, there's this wonderful bookstore. A couple things I especially admire about it. The fiction selection, I think, is really, really well curated. I always find something I'm really excited to read there. And there's a huge poetry section, which I don't think you frequently see. So those are some of the things I love about Bedlam. I'm so happy that you all are in our community.
Thank you. That's so nice to hear.
It's always great to start off with just, kudos. Right, Nicole?
Warm fuzzies.
Yeah. So I find this really interesting, Kate, that you moved to the community before there was a bookstore, and you, along with Nicole, noticed the absence, right? Because Nicole, my understanding, you recognize that Worcester was missing a bookstore, and that's what inspired your journey. Can you tell us a little bit about how the bookstore came to be?
Yeah. So I moved to Worcester in 2014. I had long lived in the Central Mass area, but I moved to Worcester in 2014. And I was just so amazed at how much was in this town. And I kept saying, this town has everything except a bookstore, like a good independent bookstore. And we actually have some friends that own independent bookstores in Northampton, Mass, and in Vermont. And we tried to convince them to open one here. And they were just like, Well, it kind of just happened that I eventually decided to leave my corporate job after, nearly 20 years in the corporate world. And I was really kind of floundering for a while, looking for something to do. And to be quite honest, this idea of opening the bookstore came as like my last resort, just totally at the bottom of, I don't know what to do. And it was amazing to me when it started to take traction, when it didn't happen right away. And it was a little challenging at first to find a space. But then once I hooked up with the Canal District Business Association, everything just started to fall into place. And one thing led to another. And then I couldn't even believe that we were opening in November 2018 and that we're still here.
We've been interviewing authors in bookstores for, I don't know, this is our 77th episode, I was saying before we went live. So we've talked to a lot of booksellers and and authors. And one of the things that the booksellers have always said is the community of booksellers is really wonderful, that you can turn to one another and get support or get encouragement. I think about the Boston area where there's this incredible concentration of indie bookstores. And yet they seem to see one another as partners in the literary scene instead of, say, competition. So I wonder, as you go into this community, where you were at the books, like you saw an absence of a bookstore and you created one. Did you find that the larger book selling community in New England was helpful? Was offer resources?
Yeah, well, I can say that, there was certainly a lot of excitement, I think, about Worcester getting a bookstore again. In terms of getting assistance or advice from other booksellers, it could just be because of our little insular friend group where they already are booksellers, that kind of was our advice. I mean, I went to, the owner of Raven Used Books in Northampton, which is a real institution, where my partner especially is really good friends with her. And in fact, they used to work together at bookstores. So we certainly got a lot of advice from her. But I kind of looked at that mostly as because we were such good friends. But everybody has been totally welcoming. And it's true that there's a real sense of camaraderie, because anybody that's doing this work is doing it because they love it. I am not in it for the money. I don't think I ever will be. I mean, I hope that, you know, someday bookstore owners strike it rich, but until then, it's just for the love of what I do. And so I think that's one of the reasons why there's such a camaraderie, because any bookseller knows, you know, why you're doing what you do.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It is a tremendous commitment to your community that you're
Yes,
deliver the service.
it is. And yeah, and I really felt that I don't think I was prepared for how much that moved me, that I get to do this for my community. And it was very moving. It still is very moving. I love getting to know regular customers and talking to them.
Speaking of a regular customer, dun, 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 dun. Kate, congratulations on your debut.
Thank you.
This is a really wonderful book. I love the descriptions of your book too. So let's see. Let's just go over a couple of important facts. You won the Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction for this book, it was selected by Roxane Gay. Roxane Gay. She called this book, I know, right?
That's amazing.
She calls Mad Prairie delightful and imaginative, sometimes strange and sometimes disturbing. She adds that your writing has intelligence, humor, and charm. Other descriptions of Mad Prairie that I found that I loved. There's a dark electricity pulsing through Kate McIntyre's stunning debut collection. I love that dark electricity. I thought that was so good. And then another description of this book is that it's a fever dream, which actually I thought was perfect.
Yeah.
I thought that this book, these stories, so for our audience that hasn't yet read Mad Prairie, it's a they're linked short stories and a novella. I thought this book was just so alive.
Oh, thank you.
It felt like vivid and suspenseful and, you know, thought provoking. I keep thinking about it after I finished reading it. Those blue children, like I just, you know, and also, can we talk about the cover? Such a good cover.
The cover is gorgeous. Cover designed by Erin Kirk. Like, she does such a gorgeous job. Yeah.
It's
fabulous.
I
and
love
the details on the cover show up in the stories, which is a fun element.
Yes. So good. So, okay. So I've done the sort of outline of why everyone should go read this book. Interconnected short stories in a novella. But what would you say the book is about to people who haven't yet read it?
Oh gosh. It's about power, right? The way power moves through communities, and ways that power can be unseated and disrupted. It's about ways of dismantling forces of white supremacy and the patriarchy, and the way those forces can work their way through communities in ways that are both really shocking and out there in your face, and also more insidious. It's the story of friendship between two women as well. There's one character named Miriam who tracks through 4 of the stories, and you also meet her best friend, Elizabeth, and get to see their relationship unfold. So yeah, that's what it's about.
That's wonderful. I love that description. I was so curious as I read this book. Where did it begin for you? Did it begin with a character, with an idea, with the setting? And did you intend to write link short stories, or did you start with one and then it just sort of spun out from there? Can you tell us about the process of putting the collection together?
I had no idea what I was doing for a very long time. And then at the end, relatively quickly, everything came into focus. For a long time, I was just writing these stories, and they had similar themes because, you know, like all writers, there are certain things I'm into. So I noticed there were things that were showing up across these stories. But even the settings were different. You know, I had a story that was set in Chile. I had some stories that were set in Missouri, which is where I lived for quite a while before I moved here. And, one major discovery I made, I tend to like short story collections that have a little more of a, I don't know, central energy, right? Or central sort of connections between the pieces. I think that can be really interesting. So my first discovery was I can set all of these stories in Kansas, which is where I lived for the first 18 years of my life. It's the place I know best, a place I still find endlessly fascinating and beautiful. Kansas is really beautiful if you've never had the chance to go there. So that was the first big revelation. And then it occurred to me I had these stories that were tracking the life of this young woman. And the young woman had different names across the stories, but many of the personality traits of these characters were similar. And I thought, gosh, this is the same young woman. So once I started making those connections, I was able to then assemble the whole thing. And then it became, I like writing because there are some parts of it where you absolutely shut off sort of your logical brain and just write wherever your subconscious will take you. I love that part. But then what I found toward the end of assembling this collection was there's this other sort of hyperlogical part where I was making charts and timelines. I was color coding, sort of making sure that these characters fit together, that their timelines worked. I was working with multiple generations. And that part is so fun too, creating something that's so sort of highly calibrated, sort of like the inner workings of a watch almost. That was a great pleasure too.
It's such a benefit to the reader because there's that moment when I don't think I fully appreciate when I first started reading it that the stories were connected. And then there's that moment when you realize, oh, wait, this goes with this. And it's just this glorious feeling of like understanding how it's all supposed to work. So maybe understanding how the watch ticks around the watch face, right? You sort of understand that. And it's a great benefit to the reader, I think. It comes through. Wonderful. So let's talk about Kansas because these stories do take place in Kansas. What is it for? You say I've never been to Kansas. The closest I've been is Oklahoma, which I know they're not the same. But what is it about Kansas? Like, what is it that captivates you so much? And now, especially not living there, is there sort of mythology about the place that you carry with you?
Yeah. Well, I've sort of created my own mythology, really. This collection is not based in realism. There are some strange things that happen in this collection. You mentioned the blue children. There's a bodily organ that seems to have its own volition. There's various other supernatural happenings. There's some ghosts. So, I enjoyed, I went away to college, actually to the Boston area, and I found that people don't know a lot about Kansas, which is fine. But it allowed me, I think, to take a lot of liberties. Many people have not been to Kansas, so I can, as a writer, tell them what it's like. This is exactly how Kansas is, folks. You should come visit. So I think that was fun. I had this great sort of liberty to invent Kansas and offer it up to our coastal friends. This is what the state's all about. And then as well, I really enjoy, this is a factor of the landscape of Kansas. And then I think, people of the heartland, there is sort of a still surface. You look at the landscape of Kansas and what you see is these prairie grasses sort of blowing in the wind. You see a fence, maybe with limestone fence posts, barbed wire. You see sort of a lone gnarled cottonwood in the distance. But then underneath that soil, there's so much energy. Prairie grasses are remarkable and really important for erosion control because their roots go so far down into the soil, right? There's this sort of hidden dimension and vibrant life under the soil in Kansas. Kansas is a place that used to be covered by an ocean. So there are fossil remains of that part of its history, which is interesting to me. And I think similarly, you know, the land has all of these secrets locked inside of it and all this sort of hidden bubbling energy. And I think people of Kansas, there's something similar. You know, there's this affect, which is flat and friendly, and then there's a lot of really royally and interesting subversive energy lurking sort of just underneath the surface. So I wanted to capture that.
Oh, wow. The land has all these secrets locked inside it. Ooh.
Yeah.
I want to read this book.
Oh, Nicole, it's so good.
I can't wait to read it. You are going to bring some copies into Bedlam for me.
Absolutely.
So, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, Kate. That's a wonderful description of both your book and Kansas. I love that. Secrets locked inside. That's wonderful. A place where we can go to unlock secrets. Dun, 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 dun. Here's my segue into Bedlam. The bookstore is where you can discover so many things, isn't it?
Curiosities.
Tell us, Nicole, what I walk into Bedlam and I want to, what's the experience like? What do you find that your audience, that your customers are eager to read these days? You have a mix of used books and new books. How does that work? How do you select the books to be in the store? Do you buy them? Because I think you might be one of the first like used bookstores that we've had on the show. So I'm curious how that process, how you find the books in the store.
Sure. So, well, the whole premise of the store in general is that we wanted to create a space where people could have the bookstore experience. I think when you walk into a bookstore, not everybody wants to walk into the Barnes and Noble or, you know, the out of the box store. There's a real sense of curiosity and discovery, something new to find when you walk into an independent bookstore, because there is a different kind of curation happening, and it's not algorithmed, and it's, you know, deeply personal. So that is definitely a hallmark, I think, of our store. It's myself and the book manager, Patrick Warner. We curate everything we have in that store, and we decide what's going to be on the shelves and what's not going to be. And, you know, as I mentioned before, Patrick has, he had years in the past of bookstore experience. So I very much relied on him for that. But the wonderful thing about that is that he has certain tastes and I have certain tastes, and we're able to achieve a nice balance for what the bookstore needs as a combination of, you know, like I'm really into science, I'm really into poetry, I'm really into psychology, women's studies. He's really into history. He's, you know, I have read a lot of spirituality books. We both do some fiction. He's into sports, he's into philosophy, you know, it just balances that way. So there's that element. And then the new books was something that came out of the pandemic. It was something that I started doing. Well, it was actually two things. It was the pandemic, and it was also the George Floyd Black Lives Matter turning point that we all, you know, we had that reckoning point culturally in this country. And I decided that there were some topics and some books that I just felt you shouldn't wait till they get to a used bookstore. You shouldn't wait till they get to Bedlam to read them. You should read them now. And so I was like, well, I am a bookstore, so why don't I just carry it now? So that that sprang out of that impulse. And, you know, some of the first things that I started curating were I really stocked a lot of books about race, Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist, Caste, White Fragility, carrying a book right now called The Sum of Us. And then it kind of expanded a little from that, and it was like, oh, well, there's certain authors that people always want to read, and we never find them at book sales, or we rarely find them at used book sales. So I started carrying James Baldwin, and I started carrying Sylvia Plath, Beljar, and it just kind of grew out of that. And now I'm kind of the one that chooses the new books mostly, and I just kind of very much cherry pick what I think is urgent, relevant. There's some books on climate change that I'm carrying right now. I always think that's an urgent topic, and that needs to be, first and foremost. So that's kind of how I go about that.
That's excellent. I love this this way that you can influence and change minds by the book selection that you're making, isn't it? It's like,
it feels like a big responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, and it's funny because I never thought of myself this way, but I realized, well, I have a pretty well-rounded interest in all sorts of areas. And, I'm also a poet. And so there's certain poetry books that I feel like, oh, people should read these now. And so I even carry some current poetry, like Natalie Diaz's post-colonial love poems, which is also very topical and relevant. And, she's like one of the first Indigenous poets to win the Pulitzer.
Wonderful. Thank you for that suggestion. We'll put the links in the chat. I know the link to buy Kate's book from the store is in the chat, so we'll put these other ones as well. And we have a question from the audience. I'm going to put it up on the screen. I'm still here, just hidden. This is Jamie. Thanks, Jamie. Hi, Kate. Huge congratulations on the book. Did any of the mythology you created about Kansas come from things that you had imagined as a child growing up there?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, it's so nice to see you, Jamie. It's been so long. Hey. Yeah. So one story setting in particular, there is this place outside my hometown called Lindsborg, which is a Swedish community, absolutely charming place to visit. And then outside of Lindsborg, there is this WPA project, was built in the 30s, this sort of squat castle built on a hill. As much as Kansas has hills, it's built on one. And there's this gorgeous overlook of the surrounding scenery. And that sort of small and humble castle really captured my imagination as a child. And then as I was writing a certain story, there's a character who actually sort of lifts off and floats away. And the place where he does that is that castle. The area is called Coronado Heights, which I think is interesting. There was, legend has it that Coronado, when he was on his search for gold, got as far as Lindsborg and then said, time to turn back. So that's why the hill is named that, which I think is a wonderful detail. So yeah, that is a place that really, really inspired my work. There's another story in there called the Moat, which involves some acts of extreme landscaping. There is a man who decides he's going to start this landscaping business, offering to build moats around people's homes. And at first, you think, what a weird entrepreneur this man is. But then as the story continues, it's told from the point of view of his wife. You begin to find out that he has sort of this sinister agenda, which involves trapping her and his children in the home. It has a little bit of a horror aspect as things continue. And we had a neighbor who was always landscaping. Our yards are very flat, but he added like this really kind of amazing serpentine dry creek. He was constructing this brick sort of bridge that ran over this creek. Like he was just always going, with some concrete and a trowel and some bricks. So that, stuck with me. I thought that was a really interesting thing. We have these flat lawns, mostly just grass, and he had a different vision. So I thought about, and I think about this a lot, how can what would this look like if this vision were exaggerated to its logical extreme, and then we went 2 steps beyond that? What would that look like? So yeah, that's where that story came from too.
Wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. I think that's also an understatement. This man opens a landscaping business. That's all I'm going to say. You got to read the book to understand what that means. Nicole, we've been hearing a lot on the media and also from other booksellers that the supply chain is causing so many problems for Christmas and Hanukkah and the holiday season. And I'm wondering how that manifests for a store like yours that has a lot of inventory that is made up of used books. So how are you seeing the same sort of supply chain crunch? Like, what would you recommend? Because in fact, it's kind of a really clever idea if you think about it, because a used bookstore is better environmentally. I mean, there's all these reasons you already know the benefits of a used bookstore. But I'm curious how it comes into play when a time like this, when people are having a hard time finding what they want.
Well, I think that this is one of this is what a used bookstore was made for, is this time. You're right. We are not having supply chain issues. We're not having trouble getting books. In fact, quite the opposite. We've been inundated with the amount of library sales going on and the amount of books that we've been bringing in. It's been like, whoa, it's been awesome so much. So one of the things that I like to say is, let's face it, we haven't all read everything we want. Sometimes a year goes by, sometimes a few years goes by, sometimes a decade or more goes by, and you still haven't read that thing that, oh yeah, I wanted to read that. Well, I think that's the beauty of the used bookstore. There are so many books out there. I mean, it's impossible to wrap your hands around everything that's out there. And, in a new bookstore, you're only going to find this, probably mostly what's popular or selling, whereas there's all sorts of things that we think are interesting that have just fallen out of fashion, or, books that, are quirky or forgotten, or that we've never even heard of, but this topic sounds amazing. And, this author sounds really interesting. And so we just think that it's for the curious person. It's for the person that wants to really explore and find that book that they're looking for. And that's the kind of experience you can't get shopping online. How do you search the inventory when you don't even know what you're looking for? How do you browse? And so that's why we take a lot of pride in how we've arranged everything and the sections we've created, and we've tried to make it, clear and easy and not overwhelming with too many books. Yeah.
So that's a great suggestion for people who are looking for books to give this holiday season, because we all know books are the best gift.
Totally.
Anytime of year. And that you're encouraging people to think beyond the immediate
bestseller list,
to look at the backlist, except for only we want to talk about this new book. But this is a great holiday gift. Looks so pretty.
That's right.
Wrapped in a big bow. But what you're calling for is this idea of being open to something that may have come out a year ago. Just this idea. I love this idea that your store is for the curious. That's just such a great
Yeah, it really is. I mean, for instance, we had a bunch of copies of Michelle Obama's Becoming this year, and you would think, oh, well, who hasn't read that? Well, there were plenty of people out there that hadn't read it yet and were really curious to read it, you know? So we don't always get to everything that we want to read. I mean, oh my gosh, my to be read pile is just out of control. So, you know, books, they don't expire.
So many books, so little time.
Yeah.
Kate, what have you been reading lately that you would recommend to our audience other than Mad Prairie? I'm just going to everyone to read this book.
I have two great recommendations,
Please.
Both written by friends of mine. It's been kind of remarkable. They've both come out. I believe one of them came out in August and then another one in September. The first one is by LaTanya McQueen, and her book is called When the Reckoning Comes. It is also a ghost story. In this case, the novel is set at a plantation in the South that has been converted into a wedding venue in this morally problematic way, right? This sort of experience of the Old South that leaves out so much of the actual lived experience of people on the plantation, people who were enslaved on the plantation. The main character goes there for a wedding, and over the course of the novel, the ghosts of the enslaved people rise. It's just stunning. I was reading it with bated breath. Toward the end, I was just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So good, so good. So that's my first recommendation, When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen, which I saw was also today. Goodreads has sort of their reader's choice categories. Her book is a reader's choice in horror. Yeah, everyone should vote for it as well. The other book I would recommend is by Ye Schuen, Yechun. Her book is called How, H-A-O. It is a story collection published by Catapult, and the main characters are Chinese women and Chinese American women, many of them mothers, and it explores these wonderful themes about writing and language and bodies, and sort of the inheritance of bodies, and it spans time. You know, there's stories set sort of in 1000 BC. There's a story set during the Cultural Revolution in China, wondering the gold rush in the United States, as well as contemporary stories. And they're just so smart, so gorgeous. I highly recommend both of those books.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you. Those are great suggestions. I love hearing what people are reading. Nicole, we have a question we always ask our booksellers. Please finish this sentence for us. Running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
Love.
Love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah. Anybody that does this has to love it. Because there's some tough times, there's slow days, you have to love it.
You do.
And you have to love the people that you're helping get this great reading material into their hands. So
how do you do that? I'm always fascinated by that sort of alchemy of a customer walking in and coming up to a bookseller and saying, what should I read next? How do you make
that is one of the hardest questions, I think, when they don't really know what they want to read and they're just like, recommend something good. And it's like, oh, but what do you like? You know, what's your taste? So I usually try and suss them out a little on, well, who else do you like to read, or what kind of topics, but, of course, my favorite section to point people to when they come in looking for poetry is our poetry section, because I take special pride in that one, and I want to have one of the best used poetry sections around, and I put a lot of effort into curating that. We have over 1,000 used poetry books. So, I love trying to make a match for somebody that's coming in looking for some kind of poetry book. And, usually the common statement is, oh, how about love poems? And, stuff like that. And I usually have some anthologies that I point them towards, but I also, there's some other go-tos that I like to point out.
Wonderful. Kate, what's next for you after Mad Prairie? I read somewhere that you're working on 2 books at once. Did I read that incorrectly?
One's in timeout though, and I just won't even. I won't
misbehave.
bother you all discussing it at the moment. So that one, maybe next summer that will get picked back up. But yeah, current project is a literary caper novel about the theft of rare plants.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, you did say there was a fancy plant store.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you
do some research? Rare plants.
Yes. Yes.
Huh. Ooh, I want to read that. That actually feeds into everyone's obsession with houseplants that kind of exploded during
what
COVID,
an odd, and also, I guess pretty logical quarantine development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you both so much for being with us today here on A Mighty Blaze. So wonderful.
Thank you, Kate, for asking me and thinking of Bedlam.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you, Kimberly, for doing this series. I think it's just such a wonderful, wonderful thing for the literary community.
Well, we're grateful to be able to spend time with authors and booksellers. And to our audience, I have not forgotten the giveaway. Don't worry. And the winner of the giveaway is Josh Gershik. I'm sorry, Josh, if I said your last name wrong. If you can email us at amightyblaze@gmail.com with your address, we will arrange to have your copy of Mad Prairie sent to you. Congratulations, Kate, again on your book. It's terrific. Dark Electricity, Fever Dream. So good. Nicole, your bookstore sounds wonderful. I'm going to have to make a pilgrimage.
Yeah, if you're in the Boston area, definitely. Yeah. And thank you so much for having me on this, and appreciate it.
My pleasure.
It's a great thing you do for bookstores and authors.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To our audience, if you liked today's show, and we hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze's page on Facebook so you can get notified about all of our other events, or hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to sign up for our newsletter. It goes out every Monday and gives you the rundown of all of the interviews planned for the week. Also, please plan to join us back here on Authors Love Bookstores. We are taking next week off because of Thanksgiving, but we'll be back December 1st, and we hope to see you there. Until then, be well and keep reading. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.